considered a solicitation, offer, or recommendation for the purchase or sale of any securities or other financial products and services discussed herein. Certain statements contained herein may be statements of future expectations, opinions, and other forward-looking statements that are based on Avory's current views and assumptions and involve known and unknown risks and uncertainties that could cause actual results, performance, or events to differ materially from those expressed or implied in such statements. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Sean.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thanks, Houston. Also here with, my co-founder, Luis Alvarez here at Avory. Micha, great to have you here today. For those that didn't miss the intro, because, we started the recording a little late, we're here with Micha Kaufman, founder, CEO of Fiverr. I'll set the stage here for, 60, 90 seconds, and then, we'll get into some questions here. But, we have our investors here at Avory that are joining or listening in after this discussion. We had, just looking at some of the attendance in terms of signups, sell side, buy side analysts who signed up for this. Again, they'll get it. But, in general, at Avory, our job is to, invest where the world is headed. A big part of that is understanding, the platforms that are reshaping, how people live, how people work, how they create, how they build. Fiverr, for us, has been one of those platforms, a business that consistently shows many of the characteristics financially, operationally, the individual running it, obviously. And, I think the shift in work is somewhat undeniable. It's becoming more digital, more global, much more skill-based. Companies want flexibility. I think individuals that are in the workforce want autonomy. The infrastructure that connects those two different aspects is increasingly becoming more and more technology-based. And Fiverr, I think, sits right at the center of that, that transition that, is a decade plus in the making with Micah. Now, despite, some of these, secular trends that I, profess, the stock has been volatile over the last few years, to say the least. And the reasons behind that have changed at the margins, but I think there's ultimately two main forces behind it. The first is one around the macro. When companies get cautious or labor market tightens, the freelance economy can feel that adjacent pressure. Hiring a freelancer is essentially hiring a partial employee. So it's naturally that it would move, in terms of the sentiment around the labor force. Alongside that, though, I think, Fiverr's executed well. Some of the noise out there has been loud, but I think the underlying business has been, rather steady. The second, and, you could argue the most important in terms of noise is AI. We're in a moment where investors are asking, which companies are, remain essential in a world where more tasks can be automated. Our view is, simple. Humans in the loop will be critical in many areas. Platforms that help orchestrate that work, I think, stand to benefit. But those questions have added, I think, another layer of complexity to the story. As I wrap up, I think this conversation matters. Beneath that volatility, I think, is a foundation of record cash flows, almost, record profitability, margins expanding pretty much every year. If I go back 5-6 years ago, margins were negative. Today, they're at 20 or roughly close to. They pulled forward their, farther out medium-term target of 25% margins ahead by a full year. Revenues, remain near record levels. And yes, there's some questions about active buyers. But if you have listened to Micah and the team, the upmarket strategy that seems to be gaining ground continues. You look at record spend per buyer continuing to go up and to the right as a function of, viability of what, they have been talking about. So today is unpacking all these things, the foundation, the future, hearing directly from Micah, the leadership of this team. And again, we welcome you here today, and thanks for joining us, Micah.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Micah,
yeah, so
it's Sean's birthday today. He's 37.
Oh my God. Happy birthday, man.
We met when he was 25.
God. Amazing.
We're
Congrats.
always throwing celebrations, but back to work. The look, to start out the first 5 minutes, not even, a couple minutes, just I think everyone should hear from you, the origin story of Fiverr. What was original insights of Fiverr? What were some of those hard decisions you had to make early on, 10, 15 years ago to get where you are today?
Yeah. So really the origin or the insight that we had when we created the company was that people wanted to build and grow businesses, and they needed help succeeding. And we wanted to help them do that, but also help each other do that. And what we realized was that the way to find and engage with talent involved high friction, inefficiency that could be solved with the concept of service as a product or the creation of a SKU system that would make finding qualified talent in what became almost 800 different categories as easy as ordering an Uber. And this was really the epiphany. And this was something that was never done outside of e-commerce before we've done it. And probably for good reasons, because unlike retail, where the SKU system is very well defined and is universal, when you think about services, digital services, they're very hard to define. There is no universal definition for it. There is no universal SKU system. Everything is nuanced. A lot of the services are very subjective and they vary between people. So the task of creating the SKU system was highly complex and questionable until we were the first to do it. And I think that this was really the main breakthrough at the beginning. But we also saw this opportunity of creating an open horizontal platform with a very strong flywheel effect. And actually, the way we started it, and this was all about, having a very smart and viral flywheel effect, was to start offering services for $5. That was the basic economy of Fiverr at the beginning. And the purpose of that was to really create something that would go super viral without us having to invest money into it. Actually, the company at that point was bootstrapping. So we coded, we were two founders, we coded the entire thing ourselves. And that story of making these microservices for a flat fee or a flat price was the claim to fame at the beginning. But it also allowed us to make many people intrigued about the idea, people starting to make money, people starting to see value in engaging with other people. And that was kind of the start of the creation of a whole economy around this. So this was kind of the very early stages. And I think that the key decisions and maybe learnings were that we needed to create a community based on trust. And trust allowed us to scale and become more than a one-time solution for our customers. And so by providing not just a matching service, but being their partner and facilitating the entire aspect of transaction from contracting to NDAs to payments to communication to providing money back guarantee to providing support to being involved was a key component of the success. And when you think about all of these factors have been taking us all the way to today, which created a very resilient business in a fast changing economy since then.
Got it. So, people that are listening in, you run a marketplace today. You have buyers on one side, people buying services, right? Very similar to the early days, just the type of, jobs have changed over time. I think that's
Right.
important. We can touch on that later. But in general, if we started to break down, some of the key elements of, the business itself, so people have a better understanding of, the supply dynamics, who they are, what do both sides of, that supply look like? Demand trends, again, it doesn't have to be intra-quarter or anything like that. Again, this is, everything that you've said publicly, but, what's happening on the demand side, the buyer behaviors, going up market, repeat behavior, again, which I think shows a level of satisfaction with the marketplace, yay or nay, and you share stats about that. But in general, I'll go one by one. Just if you could, just supply dynamics of the marketplace. Who are they, and just any context that you can share.
Sure. So you're right to call the fact that it's a two-sided marketplace where you have supply and demand. On the supply side, you have uh, freelancers that are individuals with a few years of experience, all the way to highly skilled individuals that have done work for the largest brands in the world, all the way to mega agencies that are providing tremendous amount of output for their customers. Many of them are making multiple $1 million a year on our platform. So you have a very wide variety. And again, when you think about the types of services that are being listed on Fiverr, they start from basic, somewhat simplistic types of services, and they go all the way to very, very complex projects. If we started from the $5 price point, today you have transactions that start at $5 and end up at hundreds of thousands of dollars per one transaction. So obviously that correlates with the type of supply that needs to tackle these different types of services. And it started from very simple services, and now you have very, very complex services that have to do with software creation, publishing of it, helping our customers market their creations, and scaling it up. So you have a very wide variety. On the demand side, again, since we started with microservices, at the beginning, it was mostly discovered by micro businesses and SMBs. And over the years, as we've extended the supply side or the skill side, we've started to attract the more large customers with more nuanced, more complex types of needs. So you can see, you can find any type of customer, from a individual that wants to start a business and they need to create an app or a website or promote their product, all the way to the majority of Fortune 500 companies that are doing much more complex and higher scale types of services on the platform.
Got it. And I know you share a stat that is around repeat behavior. I think it's 60-ish to 70% of
Correct.
your buyers are repeat buyers. You could just
Correct.
elaborate a little bit about who these people are, like what kind of companies, agencies are these that are driving this repeat demand? Like what satisfaction are they actually getting from this platform?
Sure. So when you look at the makeup of Fiverr's revenues, and you look at the cohort behavior, as you've said, more than 60% of our revenues are coming from repeat businesses. So these are businesses that have came to Fiverr, had a great experience, and started expanding the type of work that they do. And as they build more confidence, and as I said before, it's all about trust. When you establish trust and when you get a great experience, you allow yourself to think about other things that you can do with the platform, which makes them expand what they're doing. Some of these customers might be agencies that have repeat work, and we support some of their skill needs within the agency. That could be very large companies that have ongoing projects and they constantly need to create more. It's customers that started building something with us, but then, as I've said, you build something, you need to publish it, you need to get audience for it, you need to market it, you need to grow it, you need to continue investing in what you're doing, in your product, in your go-to market. And we've been able, through trust, to drive them to do cross-category purchases over time and make Fiverr their go-to place for anything they need around digital services. And you said that at the beginning of the intro. What we've identified over the past few years is that more and more businesses are not just relying on their full-time employees, but they augment on that talent with highly skilled individuals or agencies that can tackle very specific types of needs, that some of them are one time or some of them are multiple time, but they don't justify hiring someone full time for it. So they use the platform because of its convenience, and the fact that those who care about work misclassification and all of that, we support all of that ecosystem, by allowing them to maximize the benefits of working with talent from all around the world. So we've seen that trend growing, and actually the fact that more than 60% of our revenues are coming from repeat goes back to the predictability of the business. I've been talking about this since IPO. I mean, and you called out this as well. The profile of the company over the past 6 years since going public has been very, very different. The company was generating less than $100 million in revenues with negative, I think it was 16% EBITDA, all the way to more than $400 million and over 20% EBITDA and 25 next year. So and printing about $100 million free cash flow. So it's a very different company that it used to be, and the types of customers have been, growing with us. Sure, sometimes because of economy, there's a little bit more pressure on micro businesses because the cost of borrowing money is slightly higher. Larger businesses are taking advantage and they reinvesting their capital into growth, and they're being more prominent on the marketplace. And this has been our strategy in the past few years, investing in these types of customers. You've called out the fact that there's some trends in how much customers spend, and then there's also trends in the active buyer count. All of this is by design. So we've really refocused our energy and our investment in more complex types of projects for larger customers that can be retained for longer periods of time. They have a larger wallet. They appreciate the power of working with remote and flexible talent, and they make the most out of it. It's not that we lost interest completely in smaller businesses, but when you want to create a very robust business over time, you need to focus on those customers that are not one-timers, those who can be retained, that they have the spend capacity, and where you can make the most influence and help the most, create the most value.
Got it. Speaking of the platform more broadly, how many categories do you have today so people can understand the breadth and diversification of, what's on the platform? The latest number that I guess that you guys have.
It's close to 800 different categories, and they fall under big verticals, including everything between, design and graphics to software development, marketing, video productions, writing services, music, audio, business consultancy, finance, obviously AI related services, data services. I mean, the list goes on and on. Anything you can imagine. And actually, when we look at those categories, and sometimes people have this idea of displacements of specific types of services. For us, this has been the reality for 15 years. Categories come and go, and that's natural. We've seen categories that have popped up, have been exploding for a year, and then, they go out of favor. That's not a new thing for us. But the amount of new categories that we create is always larger than those that are out of favor. And so that dynamic is something that is constantly happening. And one of the strengths of Fiverr is being a two-sided marketplace, a horizontal marketplace, is the ability to identify trending services and needs, make sure that we fill the skill side of it first, the talent side of it first, and then we're able to start transacting around those new categories extremely fast. Everything I describe right now, identifying the need, getting the right talent, and starting to transact with customers is a cycle that takes about 2 weeks. So this is super, super fast. And in peak quarters, we've been introducing, I don't know, 30 to 40 new categories a quarter. So this depends on what we're seeing on the trends. And we became very, very efficient identifying those trends, whether within Fiverr or outside of Fiverr, and making sure that we represent those trends and those skills on the platform as soon as possible.
Yeah, we've seen that over the years where, everything changes. TikTok didn't, exist at one point, Temu and all these other things didn't exist. And they're still here. And so, people are doing, various services on your platform. Then you have, something like, some of the NFTs, right? Which was a flash in the sun for a moment, and then, came crashing down, and no one was essentially doing that. So I'm assuming, you saw this demand shot, and then, some sort of, Eiffel Tower pattern of demand.
But that's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about it, this is not very different than how Amazon runs their business, their marketplace business. I mean, there's products that are trending, and in a quarter or two, or maybe a year or two, they're gonna disappear or just go down to a smaller scale. That's fine. This is that's the idea of running a marketplace.
Right. Yeah. For some of the going to the take rate, which some of the more financial analysts out there have looked at and said, can this go higher? What is it? Why is it so high? So for those listening, they have a take rate. They take a part of the transaction that happens on the platform, being a two-sided marketplace, very similar to any other marketplace. And there's a percent attached to it. And I think it's, somewhere around like 27 or something right now on the marketplace. And then you have additional services, and you guys did a good job of separating, the take rate on the marketplace, meaning transactional, and then kind of the other services that are along that. The way we frame it internally is that, if I'm a seller of anything in life, I'm going to assign any sort of marketing towards my business. Is it 10%? Is it 30%? Is it 40%? Depending on business you are in, it's going to be half. It's going to be, 1%. If you're Chipotle, you have, 1%, marketing budget. But if you're someone that is, a consumer related company, then you're likely higher. And the way we frame it is, that take rate is a margin budget or a marketing budget for the sellers. And then you guys are starting to attach additional services on there, where you made a couple acquisitions here and there to, drive some additional, service revenue from it. Some of that is adjacent to, not necessarily directly tied to the marketplace, but then you have, ads, right? Similar to like what you mentioned, Amazon having, promoted listings on, or, advertisements on Amazon. You do the same thing, where you can supercharge a good seller or a new seller that can get in front of, the others and kind of showcase their product like any other marketplace does. If you could, like, as you go up the stack of a freelancer or somebody that is a single business, an agency, like, what are some of the lower hanging fruit, and like, how do you think of that take rate as people maybe look at it and say, hey, it's too high, but if you put it in the context of it's a marketing budget, it seems pretty right in line with, what other companies are doing.
Yeah. You called the numbers correct. So the transactional portion of what we're taking is about 27%, out of which 20% is from the seller side. You can think about it as marketing fee or expenses, which I would argue, and so do our sellers, that it's not very high, in the sense of compared to what they need to spend in order to win a customer. When you start as an agency or as a freelancer, you invest 100% of your time trying to get customers because you don't have any. even if you do have a few customers, there's time until these customers become happy and trusted customers, and they maybe talk to others that give you some credibility in the market. But this cycle is very, very slow. And what we've identified, what we've found out is that freelancers and agencies are spending tens of percentages of their time and their resources in trying to win projects. Now, when you think about it, so some people would say, great, so if I want to, if I'm trying to get, $100 transaction, it's very different than $10,000. Why do you get the same fee? And the reason is A, simplicity. Two, winning a $10,000 transaction outside of Fiverr is really, really hard. That burden we take away from these talented people, which, by the way, not all of them like to be marketeers of their own practice. They enjoy doing their own thing, whether that is coding or designing. It doesn't mean that they love being salespeople and chase their customers. And then having issues with not getting paid on time and sometimes not getting paid at all for whatever reason, and dealing with the minutia of the legalities of putting a contract and securing, that they, get paid on time. And if something goes wrong, they have a safety net. All of this is missing outside of our platform. And so we solved for all of this. And when you think about it, it allows them to, since they name their own price, they set whatever they want. They know that we're being partner only if they succeed, only if they got a customer, only if that customer paid, right? So their win, their success is our success. It's as simple as that. Now, the other services that we've provided to sellers are optional. They don't have to use them. The only reason for people to pay for these services is if they create value. And the fact that it does, that's the testament of the value of these tools and their growth. So you've mentioned things like promoted listings, or what we call Fiverr ads. Now, if Fiverr ads, if you invest $1 and you get half or nothing, you would not use this tool. It's optional. The fact that this is ROI positive, meaning you always get more than what you invest, makes sellers use it. The other is a suite of what we call the seller tools, which are a suite of tools that provide analytical tools and access to a success manager within Fiverr that helps those who want to grow their business have the right strategies on how to do this, and can get more exposure in other categories and get, the best practices that we learned from other agencies on how they grew their business. Again, you don't have to use it. If it's not accretive, if it's not creating value, people would not use it. The fact that they do and the retention of these tools is very high speaks for the value it creates. I think that we're in a good place there in terms of the portion that we get from the transaction. That said, there's a long list of additional value creation tools that we are providing over time. And so as long as they create more value than they cost, it's a good deal for everyone.
Wins. Yeah. So pivoting to AI, I know you are, we were talking about this earlier, backstage, you're the single largest shareholder of Fiverr. And the question of AI has been swirling around. We're 3 years, I think ChatGPT's birthday was this week, 3 years old. And record revenues, near record profits, spend per buyer up and to the right. So why is, or why not is, Fiverr advantage in kind of a world of AI? What's your defensibility? And kind of how are you thinking about roadmaps and such?
Yeah. So I'll start by saying that AI is creating more value than it is destroying. And what we've been seeing is that mostly if you think about displacement of specific skills, these are usually low skills, which are associated with smaller transactions. So we've seen, and we've actually we gave some disclosure around this, and we said that when you think about what we call the simple versus complex types of services that we have on the marketplace, simple is less than 20%. The complex services is around 40%. And the rest are neutral over time, meaning that they don't change, they don't go up or down. AI has no impact on it. And so what we've seen is, as I've said, we're creating more categories than we're removing categories that are no longer relevant. Two, the types of services that are associated with AI, just being able to remove the background from a photo, great. So you don't need a person to do that. That's a $5 service anyway. And it's a one time and whatever. So that's great. And by the way, our philosophy is, if a machine can do the job of a human being, human beings should not do this job, period. Right? We're not trying to defend things that computers can do on their own. That's great because it frees up people's time to find other skills and develop these skills. And we've seen, even when you think about it, as technology comes in and allows people to build more on their own. Let's take vibe coding as an example. What we've seen with vibe coding, and that's incredible. I mean, the fact that you can talk to a machine and it creates all kinds of funky stuff is great. But the reality is that the overwhelming majority of people that try to vibe code, and I'm not talking about like a birthday invitation or whatever, they're trying to create a full website or an app. The vast majority, over 90% of these people, would not finish building because at some point it just doesn't do what it needs to do, or it asks you questions that you can't answer. It asks you to connect to a database and run through security issues, and it's Chinese for anyone who doesn't know how to code, right? So this is where people get stuck. So seemingly you can create more stuff, but by the way, from a competitive standpoint, so does everybody else. Like, everybody has access to AI, and people are constantly looking for a competitive advantage. And at the end, they come to experts. Can you spend a month learning to vibe code like a pro? Maybe. But all of that 1 month to build one website, just take a pro to do it. It's so much simple. And this is why we've seen AI-related services, vibe coding is one of them, they're exploding on Fiverr. Or people that vibe coded something and now they want to transform it to another platform because they don't need to develop anything more. And so we've seen those trends going up. And actually, this is pushing customers to more complex types of needs where the average transaction is higher, where the opportunity to retain those customers over time has been going higher. And for those who have listened to the earning calls, I've been talking about this, in numbers, and you see, AI driving categories like programming and technology up 14%, right? And you see this across many other related, AI related categories, and so we're definitely benefiting more of it. And actually, the way we use AI internally has been changing the efficiency of the marketplace. So when we think about AI, there's probably three investments that we're doing. One is investing in AI categories. So categories that have to do with, AI app development, mobile development, anything that has to do with data relating to AI, machine learning, analytics, visualization, anything that has to do with AI artists, AI for businesses, either consulting, strategy, teaching people within organizations how to be more AI natives. AI video productions, AI audio, AI content. There's tremendous amount of categories being created around AI. The second one is really around, how we think about using AI on our own platform to make it better. So how we use AI to power the marketplace experience and make the matching faster, more efficient, more nuanced. And the third is AI in the operational efficiency and how we work as a team, how we code the platform, how we design, how do we do marketing, how do we do customer care. All of this has been introducing incredible efficiencies, which also allowed us to do things like, shorten the path to 25% EBITDA by a year.
Got it. I know we're running out of time here, but Fiverr has $100 million buyback in place. Highly, you're generating roughly 100 in EBITDA a year of cash flow. You don't have to expand on that, but I definitely wanted, for the sake of the listener, to get to know you a little bit more, is just one sentence rapid fire here to close out, and then I'll summarize, and then we can push past to make sure you can get on with your busy day. But the number one, again, we talked about the buyback in place, but I'll go through 5 different questions. One habit that makes you better as a founder.
Spending a lot of time reading and writing to the team.
What's the most fun part of being a CEO? A lot of hard stuff, but
no. Look, I consider myself an entrepreneur, even though it's been 15 years since the original creation of Fiverr. I still look at myself as a builder. So the funnest part is building things that change people's lives.
Cool. What do you see as Fiverr's biggest advantage today?
It's definitely the passion of our team to win the game.
Got it. Cool. Last 2. What will make Fiverr meaningfully stronger 2 years from now?
Probably not letting the noise distract us from fulfilling our mission of changing how the world works together.
Now, the big one. Will Fiverr be an AI leader or loser?
100% leader.
Cool. Well, look, Micha, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate you. Always have good conversations with you. Look, obviously, our conclusion. We have a stake in the game as well. And but again, every time I get to talk to you, post earnings, which is pretty much every quarter, seeing what's happening on the marketplace versus what you're saying, I think a lot of it is translating into bottom line results. And ultimately, if you take a chart on the S&P 500, you go back 100 years and you overlay earnings per share or free cash flow per share, they tend to move in lockstep, other than moments in time. And those moments in time are periods where the world has changed in one way or another, whether it's the financial crisis, whether it's 2000, whether it's the late 80s. But generally speaking, results tend to lead to more results for shareholders. And we appreciate you for coming on today. And good luck here at the end of the year, and we'll catch up next quarter.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for the confidence.
Awesome. Thanks, Micha.
Thanks, Micha.